All right, we are now live. So welcome everyone. Namaste Muni Buddha. I want to thank you all so much for joining me here today. As the internet knows me, my name is Quang Tri, or you can just call me Joey. I run the Buddha Journey blog and the International Buddhist Conference, and today the conference is hosting its first webinar on compassion in a chaotic world. And joining me today are the Venerable Zen Master Peter Taylor, Bhante Sujata, and meditation teacher Richard Shankman. So first, Peter Tyler, he's also known as Zen Master Babin. If I pronounce that wrong, Peter, let me know. He's also the blogger Zen Mister. He's also the author of Smell the Coffee and Wake Up, Looking for Truths and Here Now. For those of you watching or will be watching, Peter's book, Smell the Coffee and Wake Up, is now free on Amazon Kindle for a limited time. So if anyone out there wants to snatch that up, please do. Next, we have Bhante Sujata. He is a Theravada monk from Sri Lanka who has been a monk for over 30 years. Bhante's goal is to teach metta, loving kindness, meditation to people all around the world, and to teach people how to be happy. He's also the head monk of the Blue Lotus Buddhist Temple in Woodstock, Illinois. Last but certainly not least is Richard Shankman, who has been a meditator since 1970 and teaches classes and meditation retreats at Dharma centers and groups nationally and internationally. Richard is the guiding teacher of the Metta Dharma Foundation and co-founder of the Sati Center for Buddhist Studies and of Mindful Schools. He is the author of The Experience of Samadhi and The Art and Skill of Buddhist Meditation. So we are all here today, or you're here today, so we can talk about compassion and the importance of compassion and loving kindness and being able to practice it in our everyday lives, even though you might be surrounded by so much chaos and negativity, especially in recent world events and news with school shootings, wars, gun violence, and so many other things. I think sometimes this becomes overwhelming for a lot of people and creates anger and animosity towards the people creating and contributing to these events. You know, as Buddhists, we don't have enemies. We don't become angry over events we have no control over. And we try to approach everything and everyone with compassion and knowing that even bad people have the potential to be good and, of course, the potential to become enlightened. So the question here for everyone is, how do we cultivate and practice compassion in a world that feels like it's run by fear and anger and hate and hatred? And what, from a Buddhist perspective or from a practical perspective, how do we approach things and people with compassion and love instead of anger and hate? So to start off this very somewhat complicated topic, Peter, we will start with you, please.
All right. Thank you, Joey. My experience with compassion, I want to start out and tell you a little bit about myself and my journey with Buddhism and Zen Buddhism. And like compassion, I think the journey begins with suffering. And so I was raised as a Quaker in the Philadelphia area, and the Quakers use a silent meditation process. It's different from meditation, but it's sitting in community in silence and listening for the spirit. And so I was raised in that tradition. In a way, I've been meditating my whole life, but when I graduated from college, I suffered from depression. And it was at that time that I was introduced to some Buddhist writings, and I was introduced to formal meditation in the Shambhala tradition. So I started reading Tibetan Buddhism. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying was really impactful for me. I read about these great Buddhists and Buddha and the amazing powers that they had through meditation, and I was intrigued by these powers. And so I started reading, but I wasn't thinking. I was thinking about enlightenment and thinking about escaping, I believe. So I was introduced to the Pema Chödrön's books, and I started reading, and those books were written from a very compassionate place. If you ever read Pema Chödrön, it's just pure compassion coming from these pages, and that was very helpful for me when I was feeling depressed. Um, so, so that was a that was an important influence in my life, and I found all Thich Nhat Hanh was also a major influence, and talking about mindfulness and the power of mindfulness. And I didn't know at the time that Thich Nhat Hanh was a Zen Buddhist, and I knew that the Pema Chödrön was a student of Chogyam Trungpa, who was a Tibetan Buddhist, and I read from the Dalai Lama, so I really thought Tibetan Buddhism was it. I thought that they had, and they are, it's a wonderful tradition. So I thought that that was the Enlightenment tradition that was necessary. But I was still reading and suffering and going through life, meditating some. I was first introduced to meditation by a colleague of mine when I was a teacher at a school in Media, Pennsylvania. And she talked about mindfulness and meditation and counting your breaths and watching your thoughts and letting them go and all the good stuff of how to meditate. A very great meditation teacher. But you still have to take it in and practice it. And that it took me a long time before I started taking that in and practicing it. So what I did, I went through my life running around, running from this suffering, reading about Buddhism, reading about meditation, looking for ways to sort of transcend suffering, get past suffering, get to enlightenment in that way. And it was not working. I had a lot of fun, and I went to a lot of interesting places. But I was, when I would think about things, they would carry me away, and I would be worried and hurt, and I just kept reacting to my circumstances. So this journey brought me down as far as Costa Rica, and then ended up bringing me up to Canada, where I met my wife, and I became a social worker, which is sort of compassionate action, which comes out of my Quaker tradition. I always understood, being raised as a Quaker, they're social activists, and I've had it in, and they believe it's a Christian tradition, and they believe in that of God in everybody. So it's very similar to the Buddhist idea of basic goodness. But it's a God and not a oneness. But so I went into social work. I wanted to help people. I knew that helping people is one of the ways to make yourself feel good and make a living and do good for the world. But in all my readings and practice, I understood that it's hard to help people if you're not helping yourself, but you're still able to help people. So I was able to learn the craft of social work, and I was able to engage with people compassionately. And we just began learning about, you learn about compassion in the social work profession as you learn about burnout. People are working in the field of compassion, where you're seeing people suffering, you're looking for the cause of their suffering, and you're trying to help them suffer less. But it's difficult, and it puts a lot of pressure on people, and that compassion, if not done in the right way, if you're not taking care of yourself as you bring compassion into the world, you run into problems. And I continued to run into problems. But and I guess it took me, going back again, sorry, I'll back up to when I was still teaching and first experiencing depression. I met with a counselor to talk about my depression, and it was very few sessions, but she basically asked me, when I told her I wasn't able to sleep at night and I was awake, she said, "What are you thinking when you're awake?" And that was a revelation to me. I was 20 some years old and I didn't know that I was thinking. I didn't know that my thoughts had anything to do with what was going on. So it was very slow, I guess. But anyway, to continue with that slowness, it took me 25 years into the future. I still didn't make the full, and even with all that Buddhist exposure and understanding the power of meditation, I would try meditation, and I would sit in marathons. I would make myself meditate for hours, and it was always an accomplishment. You know, I wasn't there quite yet. But as I practiced social work and practiced meditation on and off when I was able to, I could feel the benefits of it, and it was very helpful. But when I got to be 40 and I was practicing social work every day and I was working in child welfare and going out into families of abused and neglected children, and it was difficult work, but it was also good work. It was causing me anxiety because I had great anxiety at that time, and it occurred to me at one point that that my anxiety was not about my circumstances, that my anxiety was just there, that it was in my body, and it was not responding to what was going on in my life exactly. At that point is when I started meditating in earnest, where I started a daily practice, and I started sitting for an hour in the mornings when I would wake up. And again, I felt that meditation practice was helpful, but I needed a teacher. And I didn't know I needed a teacher until I found a teacher. But because I had this meditation practice, it opened me up to talking about meditation with my colleagues. And I spoke to a colleague about meditation, about my meditation practice. And she told me, "You should go to this Zen temple." And it was just a few kilometers from my home. And so I went, I put it on my list of things to do. And eventually I went to check it out, popped my head in the door, and eventually I showed up for a meditation session. And I met my teacher at that time, who was the Venerable Young-gil Sunim, who is a Korean Zen master in the Jogyo tradition. And he was a wonderful, compassionate teacher, and he still is, and he's still teaching at the Awakened Meditation Center in Toronto. But I wasn't sure. That was my first exposure to a Zen practice. So I had always thought that the real Buddhism was happening in Tibet, and I didn't understand that it was happening everywhere. But the Zen practice has a strong focus on meditation, on just sitting meditation, on letting everything go, on not thinking, and on working with your koan. And the koan that we use at the Zen Meditation Center in Toronto is "What am I?" So most all new students get this koan. You know, what am I? Um, and I thought that I was something different and special, and I thought I should get my own koan. But what am I? When I talk to my Sunim, he says, work with what am I? So we practice meditation, and the meditation, the way we use the koan meditation in the Zen Center is you sit in meditation and just what am I? 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 As you breathe, and that's your meditation. And you get up and we do walking meditation. What am I? What am I? What am I? What am I? And so that was our practice. And it took a long time to get to be comfortable with that practice and to get to be comfortable with the other people in the Sangha. But it was a great practice. It's a great place to go. And it was grounding. I didn't, and he would talk. We did an exercise in the beginning in terms of throwing out your mind, which was very helpful. And each day when we came into practice, he would have a pitcher of water, and we'd fill up a bowl with the water, and then we just dump it out. And that's symbolic of clearing your mind. But that's the practice. That's one of the practice, and it's just symbolic of the Zen practice of recognizing how much of your experience is happening in your mind. And so that was a grounding. That was the grounding experience for me as I continued to practice that and continue to practice social work and continue to go through the ups and downs of stress and not stress and bringing it to practice and sitting with it. It was I felt my approach to life change, and I realized as we and then I was so enthralled with it. I was enthralled with Zen as a practice, and because then to me before I read the Mumen, the koans of the Mumen Khan, and it's they were off-putting. I couldn't understand any of them. It was it was impenetrable, and I didn't know. It wasn't like the soft Pema Trojan words that talk about your feelings and your emotions. It was all about enlightenment, and I felt like from my readings of the Dalai Lama, I felt like enlightenment was something that happened over many lifetimes, and it wasn't something that I needed to be concerned with. But Zen sort of brought it to the forefront and said it, and brought you in. We still don't know what exactly enlightenment is, but it's something that happens now. It's not something, it's not something that you wait for. It's something that's always happening now. And so I became enthralled with Zen, and everything I read then from that point on was Zen, even though the practice is telling us don't, like Sunim tells us, don't read, just sit, just do it. And but I read, and it was, and so I wanted to write, and that's where compassion comes out. What I wanted to do, what I understood, what I was writing helped me understand what I was experiencing, and it helped me share what I was experiencing. And it's that writing that brings me here today. It's a compassionate writing. So I started writing a blog, and I would just write a little bit about how to work with your mind. I was trying to interpret Zen in a way that people can read it who aren't interested in Zen and aren't interested in Buddhism. or just suffering. And and that is the essence of compassion, is to address suffering where you meet it and to address the cause of suffering. And so in my little way, that was my practice, was to write what I could, write something to say that it's okay, that you're a good person, and something that somebody would read, because I could write whatever I want, talking about the Buddha and Buddhism and Zen and how wonderful Zen is. And if people don't read it, it's not helping. It doesn't get to the heart of their suffering at all. They have to engage. So I tried to keep everything close, less than 300 words. Write it small, keep it humorous, keep it real, and write things that people who are just going through life and not interested in, or just interested in their own lives for the most part, can digest and feel better, even if it's only for those few minutes of reading it. So I wanted to do what Pema Chodron had done, and write something that allows a person to be in the moment and engage with their own suffering and engage with their own mind and be compassionate, beginning with themselves. So that was my compassion in action, besides my work, my daily work, going out and trying to solve real world problems. I could come home and write in a small contained space and help people that I felt were suffering in the larger world. And I found that people responded, and there was a lot of suffering. When you get out on the internet and you reach out to people who are suffering, you just find just so much suffering, and all people trying to find ways to work with their suffering. And so I kept going, and that became part of my practice and part of my compassion, and it's but then as I keep growing and experiencing the benefits of compassion, we talked about in social work compassion burnout, which is compassion fatigue, and the other side of burnout is compassion satisfaction. If you're doing compassion in the right way, you don't burn out. You are understanding the suffering, responding to suffering, and you feel better for it. It's a non-selfish activity, and it rejuvenates you as you practice compassion with awareness and understanding. And so as my understanding of compassion evolved, I continue to engage in the Zen world. I was exposed to Roshi Joan Halifax of the Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico, who writes eloquently on compassion. And she gave me she wrote, and I read a very helpful breakdown of compassion, which sort of changed how I looked at compassion as more of a process, it's not just understanding what somebody else is feeling, it's understanding what somebody else is feeling and caring about what somebody else is feeling and fixing or helping to make helping to make people feel better, helping to work with suffering to make it go away. So she presented compassion as a very tangible process, and which begins with understanding your own feelings. So you start by checking if you're working with another person, you're part of that interaction, and so you have to know where you are. So you check in with your own feelings, you feel where you're at, and you breathe, and you bring yourself to the present moment, and you see what are my feelings. And when you get a sense of where you're at, then you can see where the other person is at. You talk to them, you find out where their feelings are, and you engage with another person's suffering. And following that, you see what is causing their suffering. You look to the cause of their suffering. What do you think is causing their suffering? And that's a distinct step. And when you see a cause of their suffering, then you think, what could cure this suffering? What do I think will help this person's suffering? And you have an idea of what might help that suffering. And then the next step is, what can I do? What is it? I know that this would help that, but what is it that I can do that would help that suffering? And that's a different step, to recognize what it is that you're able to do in the process to address suffering. And then the next step is doing what it is that you can do. It's one thing to see what would help, and it's one thing to see what you can do to help. And then it's another thing to actually do that, the compassion in action. So you do what you can to help. And finally, if you're in a compassionate interaction with another person, when you're finished with your interaction, you put it away. You put it behind you. You say, I've done what I can to help here, and now I'm somewhere else. I'm moving on. So Roshi Joan Halifax talks about that she has a grace protocol with the acronym GRACE, where she talks about how to compassionately engage in a professional way, or in your home life. But I found that working definition of compassion, it was very helpful to me, and I use it constantly in my writing as I talk to people about how to use compassion in their lives to address their suffering and the suffering of those around them. So the other, and if you, on the web, and you can see links to it on my website, but she gave a good speech about that on the Wisdom 2.0 conference this year. And the other influential person, who's a social scientist, or not a social scientist, a neuroscientist. He works in, Richard Davidson works in the University of Madison in Wisconsin. He's been studying meditation, the effects of meditation, for years, and he works with the Dalai Lama in that study. He's been doing that for years, and he talks about the effects of compassion and the effects of mindfulness. So it gives, in a world where there's lots of Buddhists who are practicing these practices, he's translating the benefits of meditation and mindfulness to the Western world, or to anybody with a scientific mindset that helps you see how this meditation and how compassion is working. And he also spoke at that Wisdom 2.0 conference with Joan Halifax about his research and the mind-body connection, of how your mind actually influences the expression of your genes. But one of the things that he talks about is resiliency, which I think is an important part of compassion, where when they do studies of experienced meditators, and they put them in the fMRI machines and monitor their brain activity as they meditate. And the one experiment that he talked about was they deliver a pain to the people. They had control people who would get this pain, and they would have experienced meditators who would get this pain. And so they'd ring a bell. They'd be in the fMRI machine, and they would ring a bell before the pain is delivered, and then they would deliver the pain, and then the pain would stop, and then they would continue to monitor the brain. And what they found was that they were measuring resiliency, and they found that the meditators were much more resilient in response to the pain. So their graph, as they'd hear the bell, the control people who aren't experienced in meditating would be getting ready for the pain. They'd hear the bell saying the pain's coming, and their anxiety would go up. They'd say, "Oh, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna hurt." And then they get that pain, and the anxiety would spike, and it'd say, "Oh, it really hurts, it really hurts, it really hurts." And then it would come down, and then it would stay up there. Say, "Oh, that hurt, that hurt, that hurt, that hurt, that hurt," and it would carry on like that. And eventually, it would come back down. Whereas the experienced meditators in the same machine, they would hear the bell, and they say the pain's going to come, and then they get the pain, and it would spike, and they'd feel the pain intensely. And then when the pain was over, it would go back down quickly. So that's a measure of resiliency. And that and other experiments that he and other scientists have done on meditation demonstrate in a very concrete way how meditation and compassion are skills. That they're not just some things that some people have and some things that other people don't have. They're skills that everybody can develop for themselves. And those skills translate into the mindfulness practice, not just the meditation practice, but the mindfulness practice of watching your thoughts through the day and night, paying attention to where you are at any given moment. So those ideas of a concrete way to measure compassion or to practice compassion rather than just being a compassionate person and understanding what other people feel like, and resiliency, being in the moment and recovering from traumatic events or stressful events and working with that these are some of the real world impacts that these practices have. And so, and the practice itself is simple. There's lots of people that teach meditation, and everybody wants to do it right. And they're, you know, how am I doing? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And they worry. But it is a practice of being present. And there are right ways to do it, but there are, you know, the main thing is to be doing it, to recognize, and doing it begins with recognizing where we are suffering, and practice compassion with yourself. If you're not in a place where you can help somebody else, and if you're feeling depressed and stressed or any number of things, these practices can work for you, that you don't get carried away with your thoughts. You remain aware of your thoughts. You see how your suffering is happening. You recognize that you're suffering, and that gives you a moment to engage with that suffering rather than run away from it. So the practice is always simply going back to your breath. Bringing yourself back to the present moment, and in that moment you can work with anything. And so trying to pass on that, I think, understanding that simple practice, understanding that we have a mind and we have a body, and that these two entities are connected, and that we can use our body to bring our mind back to center. We can use our breath and our body time and time again to bring ourselves back to center. Whenever life is carrying us away is very helpful. And I feel that the way we work is we forget. We keep forgetting. We might know it 1 minute. We might know something so important 1 minute, that life is great and that we are good people and that everything is good. And then something happens to us and we forget. We don't know how to we completely forget everything, and we're carried away in the world. And so we got to remember to come back. And so that's what the that's what the practice of compassion in the world is for me. I feel like you come back, you've come back to yourself, you understand that you can face anything that comes your way, and you just have to be there with it. That if you're suffering, you recognize you're suffering, you look for the cause of your suffering, you look for what might help your suffering, you look for what you can do to help your suffering, and then you do what you can do to help your suffering, and then you watch your suffering move on, and if it comes back, you do it again. And when you learn to watch your thoughts and see how your thoughts judge and your thoughts carry you off to the future and worry and in the past and regret, and you bring yourself back to the present and see what you're thinking, see what you're judging, and you're judging yourself, you're cutting yourself down. All these things are just habitual practices that by learning to watch your mind and breathe and bring yourself back to the present moment, you're able to let those thoughts pass, and you increase your resiliency, and you can increase your capacity for compassion. You learn compassion. And when you learn compassion to yourself, when you notice yourself thinking things that are cutting yourself down, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not pretty enough, whatever it is, those things, you don't think that when you're being compassionate to yourself. You're more you think that's not nice, that's not right, and you go back to your basic goodness. Say, yes, that I'm basically good. I'm fundamentally a good human being. I'm trying. I don't want to suffer. I don't deserve to suffer. And I don't. And then you watch the suffering pass. And that practice, again and again, will lead you to peace. And it's not terribly complicated, but it's not easy to keep doing it and to keep remembering that we have to do that. So when you're able to get that sense of compassion for yourself, then your world your compassion can expand to the world. You have more reserves, and you can be compassionate for the people that you like, for the people that you love, your family, your friends, and you practice compassion for those people. And then your compassion increases, and you can practice compassion for the world. And you still will come back to yourself and practice with that. So to me, that's the essence of practicing compassion, that it's necessary to understand that it is a skill, and it is the most valuable skill that you can have to create the conditions for happiness in your life. And meditation and mindfulness helps you build that capacity for compassion. It gives you the opportunity to see your thoughts as thoughts, not the truth from above, and engage with them and let them go and see the next thought and be present. So that's my recommendation and practice for compassion in this chaotic world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Oops, that's not me. So next, Bantu Sujata, if you would please discuss your recommendations for us to live by compassion in our ridiculous, chaotic world.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Or good evening. I don't know wherever you live. So thank you so much, Joy, inviting me to this beautiful program. So I was mindfully excited about it. So anyway, you all know about me. I'm Bhante Sujata. I'm a head monk of the Blue Lotus Buddhist Temple out of Chicago. It's all Unitarian Church. Now we call it Blue Lotus Temple. This is the only Buddhist temple in the world that Jesus and Buddha both are in the same meditation room. Sit together and meditate with all different religious people and religious background. So I born and raised in Sri Lanka. Age 11, I became a Buddhist monk. Now over 35 years, I am practicing as a monk. So now my journey, I'm traveling around the world and sharing love and compassion with people, how to practice in a practical level. So anyway, first time when I was teaching meditation in my area here in Woodstock, I was teaching very common meditation technique, focus on the breath. We call the mindfulness meditation or different words we are using. So there were like 7, 8 people. They were so happy and they were doing it. I can see they are enjoying it. But same time, I experience my inner self always telling me, I'm not sure they are doing right. I want to check it. I want to discuss with them a little bit deeper. So what I did personal interviews, like one-on-one. I gave each person like 15, 20 minutes and talk to me. That day I was listening to them. I didn't teach anything. I didn't make any judgment about them. I just listened lovingly and kindly their stories. So those many people who practice with me, when they are sitting on meditation cushion, they are very happy. They are very peaceful and smiling and laughing, make jokes with me. Now I can see when they are doing one-on-one sitting with me, now they were so emotional. Some people are extremely angry and disappointed and crying. I saw all those difficulties coming out from their lives. So after I listened to their stories, I figured no matter what, we all human beings are carrying self-hatred and anger. I call it wounded mind. We all have wounded mind. Those people, they're smiling every day with me, but so many difficult stories going inside them we don't see. I think that's a good quality. We all can smile. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. I always smiling, but I have thousands of problems. But the good quality, I know how to smile. When I see people are smiling, I always feel so happy. That means they have possibility, and that means they have Buddha nature within. So then I felt so compassionate toward these beautiful human beings, my friends, my students. Then I thought we all have wounded mind. That's my favorite word. I'm always using wounded mind. If it is wounded, I can help them to cure it. So then I thought I want to change the technique of the meditation, what I am doing every day, teaching them mindfulness or teaching them breathing exercises, breathing meditation. So one day, middle of nowhere, I changed my meditation technique to people. Let's do loving kindness, compassion meditation. So the good thing about American people, when I say something, let's do it, they are so excited. They love to try new things. Then everybody said, yes, Bante, let's do it. So then I was guiding very simple loving kindness meditation. uh, I am well, I am happy, I am peaceful, my family, my friends, and difficult people, all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. Like that, I was guiding just few words. After 30 minutes of loving kindness practice, I asked them to open their eyes. Then I asked them, how do you like it? Then everybody said, it is wonderful, it was wonderful, but it is difficult. But there was a one lady, I know her almost 3 years. She's a joker. She's always funny and smiling and laughing and make us smile. And I can see her face is not good. She was looking at me directly said, I hate loving kindness meditation. So then I was thinking she's a joker. Maybe she's joking with me. Then I asked her, are you serious? Then she said, yes, I'm serious. I hate loving kindness meditation. Then I asked, why you hate loving kindness meditation? Then she said, I can practice loving kindness for other people, but not for me. If I am practice loving kindness for me, it is not right. It is not right teaching. It is selfish. And also, she said, my religious background, my cultural background always asked me to do and practice love and compassion for other people. Don't be selfish, do it for other people. Then I said, my friend, I know you many years. This is my point. If you want to practice loving kindness for other people, first you have to practice for yourself. If you don't have it for yourself, how you are going to do it for other people? Then she said, no, it is easy. Then I asked how. Then she said, I come to this church 15 years. I'm doing a homeless program. I'm helping them homeless people last 15 years. I'm the coordinator. I love them, I support them, I help them. So this is my loving kindness practice for other people. So no need to do it for myself. I'm doing for other people. So then she said, you are wrong. Without doing for myself, I can do for other people. I'm doing it. Then I felt, that's right. She's right. Anyway, she's doing for the homeless program. I know exactly what she's doing. So then I started to think about it. Then I said, no, still you are wrong. So I said, if you want to give love and compassion to other people, it has to come through within yourself. If not, it doesn't work. Then she said, no, I'm not agree. Now she is kind of arguing with me. Then I had the delusion in my mind that time, it is gone right now. I'm a Buddhist monk. I can fix the whole world. So I think that's my delusion. I don't have it now. I know I cannot fix whole world, but I can fix myself. Having that intention, I said, let's think like this. Now you want to give me a gift. So you wrap me something beautiful, very excited. I'm giving a gift to a Buddhist monk. So now you are giving me the gift. So I receive it. After I receive your gift, what is your expectation? Oh, after I receive your gift, I don't say thank you to you. How do you feel? Anyway, she was angry. She was looking at me straight and she said, it means you are a terrible Buddhist monk. So then I said, thank you. I know how to handle that. So then she said, if you are a Buddhist monk, if you are practicing loving kindness and compassion, you have to know, you have to learn how to say thank you. I said, yes, I totally understand. Then I asked her, did you give me this gift? And then she said, yes, that's why I spend my money. And then I asked, do you love me? Then she said, yes, that's why I'm giving this gift, because I really care about you. I said, if you really care about me, if you really love me, you can give me a 1 gift or 10 gift, it doesn't matter. I can receive all your gift. After I receive your gift, my responsibility to say thank you or appreciate it. If you have expectation, there's something wrong with you. That means you are not giving it to me yet. Physically, I am holding your gift. Mentally, you are holding it. That means you didn't give up yet. That means you are selfish. You are not love this monk. Still, you love yourself. And so, when I say you are selfish, then people start to laugh. So she was so offended. And she grabbed her purse and she said, I don't like you. You are not good Buddhist monk. I never come to your group again. And she stormed out. So then anyway, I felt a little bad about it. Then I thought I can handle it better, but I felt I did the right thing. Then I asked people to calm down. It will be fine. Then I shared another experience with people when I was in Australia a long time ago. Uh, I was waiting outside and waiting for somebody to pick me up, reading a book near a mall. I saw somebody came behind me and dropped $20 in front of me. So just imagine yourself in the summertime, you're outside, somebody throw you a $10. Maybe you feel embarrassed. Maybe, people may think I'm homeless. And so when I see that $20 in front of me, I thought, oh, somebody made the donation to me. Then I was so happy because I got $20 anyway. And so then what I had to do now as a monk, I'm so used to those kind of things. It is not embarrassing to me because that's a part of my life. So then I thought I want to say thank you to that person. I turned my head, I looking at the person. I saw one young man like Joy's age and walking from the distance. I didn't have time to say thank you. And also, he didn't wait for thank you. He didn't look at my face. I didn't look at his face either. So we don't have any time to communicate each other. He just gave the donation and he just left. Then holding that $20, I was thinking, this is the best gift I ever received. This is a great compassion. This is great love and loving kindness. Why? There is no emotions involved. There is no expectation in that compassion and no loving kindness. So I explained to those people. People realized that. So then what happened in the evening, I think that's this culture where we live now in Western culture, is something happened during the day. People keep making stories and keep thinking that my friend who left, she cannot sleep now that night. And what she did, she sent me a long email and sending, you insulted me, your group insulted me, I hate you all, and I'm so mad with you all, and the really negative email. Then I send a nice, kind email. My dear, please understand, most important practice our daily lives, practicing self-love, before we go to the world. And it was a nice and kind email. Then she sent me another nasty email, and I don't like you. I hate you, and I hate your group. And so then I sent another email, nice and kind email. And then she sent me another negative, email. After third email going back and forth, now I felt now she is pushing my buttons. So because my loving kindness practice is not my foolishness. So then I said, okay, whatever you do, whatever you say, I cannot control. I cannot do anything for that. But whatever I do, I can be responsible. Okay, you can send me as many as you want, many emails, it's fine. But after this email, I never reply to you. I never engage with you. And anyway, she didn't stop. She keeps sending emails. But I can see her name right away. It is very easy. I click and delete. That's what I did many times. I did delete that email, her emails. So when I do that, and she keeps sending, I'm keep deleting, and after a few months later, this very interesting life experience, I saw an email from her. Subject says, Bhante, please be kind to me. And so please be kind to me, read my email. So then I thought after a few months later, I'm fine. I just open her email and start to read. I had tears. Almost I was crying. So this is the story. That's why I said in the beginning, wounded mind, wounded mind. So she was telling me, today is my 40th birthday. She's writing this email 12:30 at night. And she said, Bhante, I totally understand self-love. That time I don't want to accept that because I have my mental difficulties. What is my difficulty is when I was 10 years old, I used to live in Los Angeles in California with my mother. My mother is a single woman and she's alcoholic and drug addict. And physically and mentally, she abused me. So I have so many hurts emotionally. And so every time, when I think about my mother, I don't want to do anything. So I was struggling, I was stressed out. A couple of times I was thinking to suicide myself. But one day when I walked by the church, I saw a little sign, the Blue Lotus meditation group. Then I thought this is the best place for me to relax. So many people come to meditation to relax, not go to the deeper practice. So she joined to the group and she said, "You are funny, you are making jokes, we will laugh." And so I really enjoy with you. One day, middle of nowhere, you start to talk about self-love. It makes sense to me, but I don't want to accept it. Why? If I accept it, I become a good girl. If I become a good girl, I cannot do mean things to my mother because it is so wounded in my deep heart, and I was waiting to do all mean things to my mother. Now my mother living by herself, I don't have any connection with her. I'm hating her. So today is my 40th birthday. I realize how many years I carried this hatred and anger towards myself and my mother. Almost 40 years. I cannot do it anymore. I have to surrender. That's the word she used. I have to surrender. I have to let it go. Right after I surrender, right after I let it go, I felt so much love towards myself. And also, I felt so much love towards my mother. End of her email, she made the statement. This is so beautiful what she said. If my mother knows better, she never do this. So I think that is enough. So, because of her ignorance, maybe she did it because she didn't have good guidance or noble friendship. Now she was always forgiving to her mother. So now I realize true loving kindness, true compassion appeared, and she learned. And then I sent a nice email. My dear, you got it, keep doing it, but I didn't invite her back to the temple. That's not my job. I'm not inviting anybody to the temple. They can come and they can go. So anyway, one day I was getting ready for the Saturday morning meditation. So I saw one older lady using a walker coming from the handicap access door. I was thinking I want to help her to come in because it's snowy day. So I walked towards her. Then I recognized another person coming behind her from the car. I recognized that's the daughter. Mother and daughter both came to meditation practice. Mother practiced with me more than 3 years. She passed away. Now daughter is very engaged, active member in our temple. I have a nickname for her. I call her Little Saint. And why? She is the most compassionate woman I ever met. And she is ready to do so many good things for the world. And she is doing a lot of charity. And she's a giver. She's compassionate person. So my point, I know the world has burning issues, fighting, killing. In the beginning, Joy said, like that. We have so many problems. But the world is too big for me to focus. But outer world, what means external world is too big for us to focus, to take care of. But our internal world, our own world is, enough. We can take care of it very easily if you have energy, if you have commitment for that. So my suggestion for people, before you go to the world to practice compassion and love, you have to start within yourself. If you don't start within yourself, very difficult for you to give it to the whole world. Why? Then you have expectation from those people. So now I think you have to understand this word. This is very confusing word. What is love? What is love? People say here in the United States, this is my second language. I learned the language. It is so confusing to me sometimes. People say, I love you. I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my brothers and sisters. I love ice cream. I love dog. Then I was so confused what they are talking about. So when they say I love my mom, I love my dog, I love ice cream, I know love is one, but our languages, we have a different words for the different love. Now I totally understand when people say I love you, it doesn't mean he or she is deeply compassionate love me. No, they like me. That like, that love, anytime can change. So now I'm so careful with this word love. When it is love is not a quality. I think love is not a quality. It is a weak human emotion. Weak human emotion. Um, As another experience I have, this is you can understand when we have weak human emotions, and emotions are fine. Emotions are a completely human thing. So when we have emotions, what we have to do, we have to recognize them. Then we have to develop those emotions to the quality level. Now think about love is emotion. Then loving kindness is quality. So all other qualities like that we can have it the emotional level, love turning into loving kindness, loving compassion, loving respect, loving accept, loving letting go. So if just love is making more problems for ourselves and more problem for the whole world. So when I was in the school, I met one of my friend. We were in the same class. One day he came to cafeteria holding a girl's hand and introduced to me, Bhante, you know this? This is my girlfriend and I love her so much. I said, congratulations, how beautiful. And young couple, how they are behaving in that age. Um, so they were so cute and he said, we are going to marry next month. Then again I said, congratulations, all the blessings to you, have a good life. So then they left. After 3 years later, I met my friend Matt at the school. Then I asked, hey Matt, how are you doing? How is your wife doing? Then he said, Bhanti, don't the talk about her. I asked, what happened? And she ruined my life. I hate her so much. We are going to divorce. I said, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. Then I said, do you remember 3 years ago, how do you introduce her to me? And he said, no, I cannot remember. I said, you said to me, I love her so much, I'm going to marry her. Then I asked him, where was that love now? Then he said, if I say so, that's not true. Now think about that's emotional love. In that day when they are behaving like a cute couple, hugging, kissing each other in front of me, I was thinking, I want to have a girlfriend too. No, just kidding. And so I'm glad I didn't do that. So now I'm understanding what is that emotional love. It is not a quality. So now many people in my community, when I travel around the world, I know truly people love me, care about me. Sometimes people call me and email me, especially when they call and people say, oh, Bante, you did a great job and I love you so much. Then my response is, me too. That's my response. When people say, I love you, I say, me too. Because if I truly love myself, it is much easier for me to love others. So now my point today, if you truly want to love and practice compassion for the world, and start within yourself. So you have to heal your wounded mind before you heal whole world. And also when you practice loving kindness for yourself, this will happen to you. This is my personal experience. So when you deeply practice it towards yourself, your personality will change. Now think about somebody really angry. Do we like that person? No, not at all. Do we say, oh, you look beautiful? We don't say that. We say, you look like a demon. We don't like angry people. So when somebody is loving and compassionate and smiling, always people love that person. Always people want to make a connection with that person. So that means when you practice it, our personality will change. So when you practice it, that energy, that loving energy come to your hands. Then you can use your palms, your hands to heal other people. Then that energy come to your eyes. When you are looking at one person, then you can heal that person. Then that energy come to your words. When you say something, it will be healing to other people. So when you're chanting, it will blessing for somebody else. So your smile, your talk, your speech, your action, and your touch, everything turning into healing energy. So what I'm suggesting you now today for all of you listening to this, the talk, and forget about the world. In your spiritual journey, you have to be selfish. If you want to make this world better, first thing you have to do, you have to be selfish. The person I'm talking about in the spiritual journey, not your everyday life, spiritual journey, if you are really taking care of yourself, in a great level, you can taking care of whole world. And I have so much to explain, but this is not the time. I think this is enough. So again, summary of this talk. World is too big for us. There are so many world burning issues, and don't engage with them emotionally. It means you are not helping the world. You are adding more fuel into it. If you see all the burning issues in the world, you can try your best to help people, and more than that, first you have to find that inner peace, inner compassion, loving kindness within you. Then you can effect that energy to create and make peace in the whole world. The best example for that, Buddha. After 2600 years later, even online, we are talking about this teaching because of Buddha's compassion and love, what he found in his mind. And think about like a Hitler. When people think about Hitler, still people get mad with him. So whatever he did, whatever he left in the world, still is affecting to the people in negative ways. So that means you are the Buddha. You are the world. You have the power. You have the strength. And think about, see that Buddha nature within, and practice and find it, and then serve to the world. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Mate. You're absolutely right. I think one of the hardest things for anybody is to have self-compassion and self-love. So that's definitely one of the important practices we all have to practice by. Last but not least, we have Richard Shankman for our final discussion. Richard?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you. My screen is down, so I'm glad you can hear me, hopefully see me. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to participate and be here with you all. And as I was reflecting on the topic, I'm remembering many times of sitting in meditation, practicing loving kindness and compassion, meditation, radiating goodwill and a sense of kindness and compassion for all beings, and then getting up from the meditation and going back out into my life and into the world and encountering actual beings and finding that it's not necessarily always so easy. That it's, of course, it's easy to feel loving kindness and compassion when that's how we feel. That's the state of mind that's arising in the moment. But the bigger question is, what do we do in the times when that's not how we feel, when maybe negativity is coming up or encountering difficult people or difficult situations? And that's when I want to spend time focusing on what are things we can do in particular during those times that can possibly help us. Because if we give our power over for how we're going to act and be and respond in the world, if we give that over just to our feeling or our mood, then we're just at the mercy of these constantly changing feelings and conditions. And so we want to find something more reliable. It's kind of really thinking of a reliable refuge or a lot more reliable place that we can come from in how we show up in life. And the first piece I want to spend a little time on that I think is so important is spending time reflecting on intention. I hope all of us, I think it's important for myself. Every day I as I start my day, I take, even if it's just a few moments, to reflect about intention in the broader sense from a Dharma perspective. You know, what are the qualities that I want to cultivate in my life? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to act? And then perhaps even intentions for the day. And I find that's very helpful to keep my intentions alive. And it can be staying close to, staying really in tune with our sincere, wholesome, I like to say beautiful, I don't, but we could say our wholesome intentions, I think is a great support and ally, especially in the times when we really need that help in difficult situations. I don't know any of you, but I assume I feel confident that you would not participate in this webinar if you weren't drawn to Dharma practice and Dharma teachings, wanting to really bring them alive, to actualize them in your own life. So I feel confident that all of us want to live in a way that's less reactive and more wisely responsive in life, where we can be more mindful and present and awake, more kind and compassionate. All of these beautiful Dharma qualities that we want to cultivate. And so and we may or may not be so conscious of these intentions that we carry with us in our lives. So making them conscious is really important. I often hear people say, you know, well, what's with all of you Buddhists? You're always talking about suffering all the time. And it's true, there is a lot of emphasis put on, you know, the Four Noble Truths are, you know, the truth of suffering, its cause, that there's a cessation of suffering, and then there's the path, the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the end of suffering. And so if we want to liberate ourselves from our suffering, we need to understand our suffering. And how do you understand anything? It's by experience. I'm not suggesting that we have to go out seeking suffering in order to experience it, to understand it. Not at all. I think we'll all have plenty of opportunities. It will find us. And when it does, we want to have the presence, the mindfulness to be able to not be caught in it and automatically habitually reactive, but being able to actually, hopefully finding, you know, this mindfulness gives us a space between what happens and then our response to it. And hopefully one of the important reasons for formal meditation practices, there's many ways and reasons that people practice, but one of the importance is to train our minds so we're not caught in reactivity so much, and we're able to be more, I like to say, more present, and that allows us then to be more wisely responsive in life rather than just habitually reactive. And so, of course, that's why some kind of formal training of our hearts and minds, I think, is so helpful and so supportive and so important. So I hope all of us can see the value of those kind of practices, regardless of the spiritual traditions, even within Buddhism. Of course, Buddhism is a big world, and so we're not all practicing in the same traditions, the same style of practices. But in some kind of formal training, I think, is so, so important. And that will help us a lot, because everything that we're all talking about, that I'm going to talk about today, it depends on us being present and knowing what's happening. I define mindfulness in a very simple way. It's defined in many ways. I define it in a very simple way as just being not lost on automatic pilot. And I hope you all know what I mean when I say being on automatic pilot. Sometimes people will say to someone, oh, you lost your mindfulness, you went unconscious. But, well, the person they weren't unconscious, but we know what they mean. They just got caught up in something. And so mindfulness means knowing what's happening in the present moment rather than just being lost in it and just caught in the effect of what's happening. So we do the best we can with that. You can't be more present and awake in a given moment than you can. But the more we can train ourselves, I think it gives that quality of wakeful presence comes through naturally more and more to permeate more of our lived experience. And so I think it gives us a much better chance to hopefully then meet any situation more skillfully. So that's the first piece. I have an aspiration, a very sincere aspiration, to live in a way in which my heart never closes off to any beings in any circumstances. And that's a sincere aspiration I have. And of course, I have lots of opportunities to see where more work needs to be done. And I think that's probably true for all of us, because by definition, until we have reached the end of this path of Dharma ourselves, until we, whichever words you like to use, and fully enlightened, liberated, whatever words you want to use, until we're like the Buddha ourselves, by definition, there are places of greed, hatred, and delusion in our minds. At least the potential, the seeds are there, waiting to sprout when the right causes and conditions arise. And it's not that we're doing anything wrong. I think this is part of being a human being. And that, just right there, is a place that's important for compassion for ourselves, knowing that all of us are sincere. We want to live and act in the world in a way that creates less suffering for ourselves and for others, and more happiness, more well-being for ourselves and for others. And so that's a beautiful intention, a beautiful aspiration. And we can be so hard on ourselves for all the times when we judge ourselves as falling short. But again, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. We all have these conditioned patterns. And one way you can think about Dharma practice is starting to shift the conditioned patterns of our minds, and then ultimately, I suppose you could say, to liberate ourselves from the conditioning, so that we're not at the effect of just the external forces that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So when difficulties arise, when you don't feel like being kind and compassionate, and when in fact, if there's a time when perhaps there's ill will in your mind or heart, I hope not too much, but it can happen, right? Or we're afraid, or we're worried, or angry. There's a challenging situation and it feels like it's too much for us, or a person is just too difficult. So the feeling may be the opposite of kindness and compassion. We may actually feel like, I really want to tell this person, or I want to really let them have it, right? And if we follow the force of that, which can be very strong, the energy can be very strong, it can lead us to act in ways that cause a lot of suffering for ourselves and for others, and can lead us to have a lot of regret then when those times, if those times happen. Of course, we have to then clean up the situation the best we can, and hopefully we haven't acted in a way that's beyond repair, but that certainly we know in the world those kind of situations can happen. So that is a time when going back to intention can really help us. It's like driving a stake into the ground that's really solid, and when something is pulling us in a different direction, we can hold on. It's like a touchstone. We can hold on to that in strong intention. And so then, so I just said earlier that I have an aspiration to live in a way that my heart never closes off to any beings. So if a difficult feeling comes up, right? If a feeling of ill will comes up in my mind, I know what my intention is. And so then I don't have to go with it just because that's the feeling, or it's just like, oh, I don't want to, oh, even for this person. Well, what's my aspiration? Well, it's not to close off my heart to any beings. Oh, I guess that includes this person too. even if I'm not feeling that kind about it, I remember, yes, okay, this is a time for practice, and it's an opportunity. And in fact, I can see that that person is doing me a favor. Well, you might say, well, why are they doing me a favor? Well, if I want to liberate my heart and mind, then I want to know the places, at least the potential conditioned patterns that that are waiting, they're lying dormant just for the right situations, the right causes and conditions to come together, than to sprout in unwholesome ways. So if I want to understand my conditioning, just like my suffering, I need to know what I need to experience. I need to be in touch with those patterns. Well, how do we connect with our conditioning, right? Where is it? You can't get to your conditioned patterns directly. Where are they? They're not, you can only get to them indirectly when the right situations arise that cause those patterns to activate, right? Cause us to be reactive in some situation, our hearts to close off, whatever our reactions are. That conditioned pattern now has been illuminated. So rather than beating myself up, being hard on myself to see, oh, I'm terrible, I'm not this, I'm not a good Dharma practitioner, I have ill will, I can see that as an opportunity for learning and for growth, right? And to hold myself with some kindness. It's not saying that I don't want to shift in a different direction, but the beginning place is just to hold myself with interest, with a sense of investigation and inquiry. Okay, this is interesting here. Here's a situation. I have this aspiration, a beautiful aspiration, a very high aspiration. Here's a place where it's not so beautiful right now. What's the feeling right now? And so I can get interested in it, I can learn. So that difficult person, if I can start to see them, it's kind of a cliche that we sometimes will hear of seeing everything as your teacher. But I don't think we should be dismissive of that as a cliche. And it doesn't mean we don't take care of ourselves and we don't do what we need to do to handle the situation wisely. So we don't want to throw away wise discernment in how we respond in any situation. And sometimes the actions we may need to take may feel quite fierce. I don't know, depending on the situation. So I'm not saying we have to stop taking care of ourselves or acting appropriately in situations. But I'm mostly talking here about the states of our inner state of our hearts and minds. Then, from that perspective, we can see situations as our teacher. And then that person's actually doing us a favor. It may not feel like it. It may feel like they're just there to annoy us or bother us. They've actually done us a favor. They've unmasked a place that we hadn't seen of the potential for ill will, say. How are we going to work with that? So if we can see them as opportunities, I think that can go a long way to helping us. And so staying in touch with intention is just so important. One other thing I want to mention also is, and then I'll spend a little time offering a couple of specific concrete suggestions, but I think recognizing that we all have limitations. Perhaps the mind of a Buddha does not have limitations in what the Buddha could work with and be present with, and but for us, we recognize that we all can have our edges. I like to think of them, I call them our learning edges or our boundaries. And there are some situations that are going to be too much for us. During those times, if we have the luxury or the opportunity to step away from a situation, we may need to do that to bring the intensity down to a level with which we really are more able to work. Sometimes it's said, it's just, we say in almost all situations, from a Dharma perspective, just be present with what's happening. You'll hear that kind of language. And we do need to learn to deepen our ability to do that. But an image I like to use is that of a circle. And if you think of yourself as sitting at the center of the circle, And then the circumference, the boundary of the circle, contains all the experiences of our lives for which we're able to really be present with and work with, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, and work with skillfully and really be with. But if something is of such a quality or intensity that it's beyond our edge, it really is something too much for us, then we have to know how to recognize that. And then the answer isn't, oh, you should be present with it. It's to know, this may actually be a little too much. And then again, we may not always have the luxury, but if we do, we want to bring down the intensity or maybe step away from a situation to gather our resources and then hopefully be able to come back to meet it from a different place. And I'll give you an example. When I first started my meditation practice, I began in 1970. I was 18 years old, and I was very naive and idealistic. And I remember I'd been meditating maybe only a year or two, and I went to the dentist to have a tooth cavity filled. And the dentist was going to give me the Novocaine to make the tooth numb, and I said, well, that's all right. Don't numb me up. I'm just going to just sit here and be present with all the experiences that arise and pass away as you drill the tooth. I don't know what he was thinking about me. And of course, it was way beyond what I could be with, And I actually did it. I had the whole tooth drilled and filled without any Novocaine. I don't know, I guess I could have stopped. I don't really remember. I could have stopped the dentist at any point and said, sorry, I was mistaken. You should numb me up, and he probably would have been relieved. But I did it, and I only remember two things. I remember that it was the thought going through my mind, which was, you have really done it this time. And I also remember just that I was just gripping the I guess the hand rests there. Maybe my handprints are still to this day on if he still has his dental chair. Just trying to tough it out and get through it. So was that helpful for me? No. Was I able to, work with it? No, it was so strong. Now that's kind of an extreme example of pretty strong pain, but it's an example of something that, it was too much for me. It was really beyond my capability of being with it. And I'm just trying to make the point that I think for all of us, there can be situations that are challenging. So the difficulty can come in that sometimes we think we're on one side of the circle or other. So if something really is, if you're sitting and meditating, I remember, and these stories are coming back, I remember the first time I started sitting longer and longer sits, and I sat, the first time I sat for a 3-hour meditation, and I could sit, I'd been sitting a long time, I could sit for 1 hour, didn't have much pain at all in the body. Up into the second hour, there would be pain, but I was still quite present and could work with it, and my mind was, equanimous and at peace, and it was just, arising and passing away, no problem. By the time I got to 2.5 hours, it was hurting, and it was so strong that mainly I was just, I had set an intention to go to 3 hours, and it was like a vow, if you will, and so I wanted to keep my vow. So and that's a wholesome intention to keep a vow, and so I think there was some benefit there. But really, that last half hour, I was just toughing it out. I was just holding on for dear life to get through because it was so painful. So I don't know how much I really gained or learned from doing that. I don't know if it was that useful. So my point is that there are times when whatever's happening is outside the edge of our circle, but we think we're supposed to be with it. And if something really is too strong for us, truly, and we don't have this opportunity to get away from it, then that really is some suffering. But we can also be mistakenly on the other side, where really there's something that's challenging and difficult, and we really can work with it and be with it. And then we move away, or we shift, or we make it in some way. And okay, that'll happen. And when it does, we've missed an opportunity. There'll be more opportunities to work with it. But we start to learn with it over time and with experience what we can be present with. Even if it gets difficult and our circle expands more and more to encompass a wider range, more and more of the experience of our life, so that then maybe for a Buddha there is no edge. But we're also able to recognize our capabilities and be respectful of them. These strong energies that can pull us, I think we don't want to be dismissive. We have to be very respectful of them, because they can take us over, and next thing you know, we're caught up, we're reactive in a way that's not useful, that's not helpful. And so these two things, keeping our good, wholesome, beautiful intentions, our aspirations from a Dharma perspective for how we want to live and be, is very, very important and supportive, especially in the challenging times, and also gaining the skill, the wisdom, or I would say the discernment, to know where we are in relationship to our edges, and when we need to really be in the fire of something, and when it's time to try and back off and care for ourselves. Again, if we have the opportunity, I think that those two are very important. So then I want to just offer a couple of specific strategies for acting more wisely and less reactively from a place of loving kindness and compassion during times when it's difficult. One thing I found very helpful is, if there's a challenging person, rather than judging that person by what they're doing, to begin by asking ourselves, what might be going on with that person to cause them to act in that way? Just sometimes by asking that question. It's like the idea of, we say, you don't know another person until you've stood in their shoes, or lived their life. So it's really trying to bring in a place of understanding and empathy. That's not to say, as I was discussing earlier, that what the person's doing is okay, and that we don't act in whatever way, it depends on the situation, whatever way we need to care for ourselves. Absolutely not. We want to, again, not lose wise discernment in how we act and respond to situations. But, if we can just take a step back and just, instead of being reactively judging, having our hearts closed off because I don't like that behavior, just sometimes by asking, well, what might be going on in there? Because I believe most people, they're not necessarily trying to annoy you or bother you. That something's going on in them. From their perspective, they may have a very, very different perspective than we do. We don't know what their life story has been, their childhood, their upbringing, all the experiences they have. We don't know what's going on with them today. They may be in their own suffering, their own reactivity, just as it can happen to us if we can end up being reactive. Just as we need kindness and compassion for all those times for ourselves, trying to see if we can hold the other person in the same way. Because after all, other people, they're just like us, they're just like you. We're all fellow sufferers. I hope we're all fellow experiencers of happiness and joy too. And I think for most people it's a mix. We experience happiness, we experience suffering. It's going to vary, of course, for each of us depending on our life circumstances. It'll vary over the course of a life or in a given moment. But certainly we're all fellow sufferers. We know what it's like to have been hurt, and we know what it's like to have caused pain and suffering. We all know what that is. And so we're all in this boat together. And so by trying to hold that perspective when we can, I think can help us not shut off to other people so much. And I just want to offer one last suggestion that I've often found to be helpful, and I know many other people have too. In a particular situation, if you find yourself in the middle of something challenging, where there's some reactivity going on, sometimes we are able, when we can remember, to shift our perspective in some of the ways I've been discussing. And sometimes it's not so easy to do it in the middle, in the heat of the moment. And so again, if you have the luxury, if you're able, sometimes it can be helpful to step away from a situation. Find something then that gladdens your heart and mind. And it may be reflecting on Dharma, reflecting on your good intentions. Or maybe you need to go for a walk, or listen to some music that inspires you and opens your heart, or listen to an inspiring talk, or do some reading, go out into nature. It might be poetry, art, whatever it is that you can find. Sometimes just looking outside, if it happens to be a beautiful day, and if you like if you're in a place where maybe you see just a blue sky, it can be anything that can start to resource us, that can help you, your heart just relax a little. And again, this idea of gladdening our heart and mind is something that's a phrase that you'll hear in the old Pali texts a lot, about gladdening our hearts, gladdening our minds. Now, what is it like from that place of a more open-hearted, lovingly kind place, a compassionate place? Now, what is it like to turn back and meet the difficult person of the situation? Sometimes that can really help us, rather than try and to do it within the heat of the moment, or from within the fire of the situation. So I hope that's been useful, what I've been talking about. And just to summarize, I encourage all of us to really take time to reflect on our aspirations and our intentions. And also, one thing I forgot to mention about that, not just to reflect on it in a just a perfunctory way, or it's just as a thought in a cognitive way. Feel the goodness of those intentions. Let it become an alive feeling for you, right? And try to keep that alive as much as you can when you can remember. And then over time, I think it naturally just stays more alive. That's been my experience. Doing that can help. Knowing out of kindness for ourselves, compassion for ourselves, that we all are human beings. We all have the potential for greed, hatred, and delusion until we reach the end of the path ourselves. That's just what it is to be a human being that's not fully liberated. And so you hear the kindness in there. It's not self-deprecating. It's not judging ourselves in a negative way. We want to keep discernment about ourselves and to know when something's not working, or if it's unwholesome, and that we can start to make shifts and changes, but not beating ourselves up or tearing ourselves down. Bring a sense of kindness that we're all, doing the best we can. And that's the final piece I want to offer, is that we are all doing the best we can. It may not feel like that sometimes, but if you could, in whatever the situation is, if you could do it better, you would. And sometimes people will say, well, no, that's not true. You don't understand. I'm actually, I'm too lazy, or I'm too this, or not enough that. If that's what it looks like, you doing the best you can, including all those kind of forces that maybe you label as laziness or whatever. Knowing that we're all doing the best we can then can help us relax so much, instead of being so hard on ourselves when we fall short. And then to keep in mind, one very kind, compassionate teacher once told me, I had I had been on a very long meditation retreat. This was a 1 year long silent meditation retreat. And I was just practicing by myself in a room. And so, you'd think that's a long time, a year. And it had been very powerful and very profound. And I was opening into these deep states, not only of these deep meditative states, but also states of deep, boundless consciousness and compassion. And it was really wonderful. And then soon after I'd left the retreat, I got into a conflict. It was not it wasn't that bad, but it felt, it was minor, but I actually still had a conflict. And I went back to my teacher in tears. And I said, wow, it just felt like everything I did was a waste. A year I spent here practicing. I'd been practicing many, many years before that. And, you sit in meditation, insulated from normal daily life interactions, and you can touch these really profound states of consciousness. And then first thing I go out and it doesn't take long, I'm in conflict, and it was just like for nothing. And I really felt a lot of despair. And the teacher kindly pointed out, well, first of all, that I had been in a very sensitive place that you get to, for those of you who are meditators, that can happen. And that my level of sensitivity had gotten ahead of my equanimity. And so there was no judgment in that. He was just kind of pointing out what happened. And he also said to me, we're all going to fall down and fall flat on our face 1,000 times. And we need to know ahead of time that that's going to happen. And when it does, just to know it's part of our learning edge, to hold ourselves with some kindness. Then we pick ourselves up, reconnect with our intentions, with our aspirations, and commit ourselves again to what's important and how we want to be, and then we move forward and we do the best we can. And by holding ourselves with this sense of kindness rather than being so hard on ourselves, it not only is bringing the compassion right there in for ourselves, the self-compassion, but also allows us to have more of a relaxed sense that, okay, we're all in this together, we're all doing the best we can. And from that place of we want to stay awake and alert, but we want to have a sense of ease and relaxation. Then we're more likely, more able, not only do we suffer less, but to respond to whatever happens more wisely. I hope that's been useful and helpful, and thank you very much for allowing me to participate with you.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was awesome. Totally agree with you. We are very reactive creatures, and I always tell my readers that I've been meditating longer than I've been a Buddhist, and I still fail at meditation. I still fail at trying to give loving compassion and loving kindness to people sometimes, but it's one of those things where people come to temples all the time, especially in my temple. People come and go like nothing. And a couple of weeks ago, I gave a teaching where I told people, our practice, not only our Buddhist practice, but just our liveliness practice of being compassionate in our very practical world, isn't limited to just going to temple. When we go to temple, that's not the only time where we have to practice meditation or we only practice compassion. It's all the time. And I think that's something that a lot of people have a struggle with, is to remind themselves that compassion is, it has its limitations, like you mentioned, but it's something that we have to constantly practice with. So I want to thank everyone so much for joining me here today. I've learned a lot, and I hope everyone else also has learned so much. So I want to thank each and every one of you, Peter, Bante, and Richard. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you, and smile and be well.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, too.